Now, this is one of those interesting officers to do. He is a key leader, and I've picked him out because, well, Japan's turned into a bit of a theme, because of while I should be out there, I thought I'd try and do some Japanese stuff on the videos to make it make sense with the shorts and hopefully everything else which is coming out while I'm in Japan. Wish me luck and cross fingers. I still have, when I'm recording this, I still haven't heard if the house and everything's gone through, which is going to give me the free cash to actually manage to go to Japan, so hey ho, I could be when this goes out, I could be sitting in my office still, enjoying, I don't know, a Cornish pasty, and not having gone to Japan. But if I haven't, then thank you for your support anyway. If I have, thank you for your support in making it possible. But Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa, he is an officer who is both someone to look up to for leadership because of what he achieves in Guadalcanal to someone else, and how he manages and stands up for his people and argues against them being thrown away in pointless campaigns, and also is one of the few officers who managed to get away with what we're fairly certain was a direct massacre, in that he must have given the orders. Either he must have given the orders, or he must have known the orders were given. Makes him a kind of controversial figure to do, but still worthwhile doing, because it's one of those things of history, and I end up this a lot. Who do you learn from in history? If it's just the people you like, and people who are nice, you don't learn a lot. You have to also study the people who are bad. And recently this came up because someone quoted Hitler when it came to propaganda. J.K. Rowling. And people said, quotes Hitler! You sit there and go, well, actually, one of the few people who probably does understand the value of propaganda is Hitler. So it's rather a useful person to quote. Really could not agree with anything else he did, but he does know his propaganda. That's how he gets to the position he is. That's how he gets to it. He's disturbingly good at politics, as quite a lot of people with his particular neurodivergency cocktail seem to be. But we'll leave that to one side. Gunichi Mikawa is another such controversial figure. He's controversial, as I said. That he does something which is really unashamedly bad. We can't prove it. He gets to live a nice long life and doesn't go to jail largely because we can't prove it. He lives till 1981. But that still doesn't mean he isn't worth learning from. Because he makes decisions. He makes good arguments. He is pretty much right when it comes to strategic situations sometimes that Japan finds itself in, and is probably one of the better officers Japan actually has in the war if they'd only utilised him properly. But the trouble is, there was a lot of Japanese high command who really didn't want someone who argued back in any position of power, because that might make them look bad. Saying all that, he was representative of his time. He was an officer who had lived and alive during the Russo-Japanese War, been alive in the forming of Japan, had seen Japan come from where it was in 1900 to where it now stood in 1940s, and to where it would stand in 1980s. He was a man who'd seen his country build itself up. And he'd seen how they'd grown after the Russo-Japanese War. He'd even seen how they'd grown during World War I when he'd served. This is the thing about this generation of Japanese officers you have to remember. They had seen a Japan grow. They had seen it accomplish more than it had failed. They had seen it keep getting stronger. The hot hand fallacy strikes again. You know, the idea that when there's a a player is very hot on the basketball court, has been sinking every single one of their 3-pointers, has been, getting dunk after dunk. People just keep passing them the ball because they've got the hot hands that evening. Or the perfect game fallacy, when a pitcher at the baseball diamond is throwing a perfect game. Okay, we don't have so many beliefs in that, I would say, as a nation. Probably we don't have as much hope, which allows us. But the thing is, Japan is a curious nation. They are both incredibly conservative, incredibly structured in their tradition, and incredibly full of vision and hope as well. You see that in their technology, you see that in their approach to problem solving, and in this case you see it in their entire generations of officers coming through. Because they've never known anything other than success. So they almost don't think it's possible for them to fail. If they fail, it's them, not their nation, not their system. It's their personal failure, never the nation failure. And that is a problem. That is a problem. You see, you have an issue which comes up every time and again, whether failures are personal or institutional. Now, if your force fails because someone goes port rather than starboard and you run into a minefield, that's personal. You can argue that's personal. Or it could be institutional because they didn't have memory about where the minefield was. They didn't have the knowledge of where the minefield was. They didn't have the information. You have to be sure which way. Or it can be a combination of both. In fact, most mistakes when organizations, especially when we're talking about war or wartime, there are more battles lost than are won in history. This is one of the other sad things you learn as a historian. More battles are lost rather than won. And they are lost through the combination of human mistakes and institutional mistakes. And the two tend to pile up in a cumulative way. And the thing is, the institution creates the human at a certain level, at a certain capability. Which means it can all come back to institution, but it's usually a fairly large amount of human involved. And this is what we see with the Japanese command structure. They have a mixture of issues. His career prior to World War II, well, he starts off in the Hiroshima prefecture. That's where he grows up. As I've already mentioned, he graduates third out of 149 in the 38th class of the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy in 1910. And then he goes and serves on Asuma and Soya as midshipman, and then later on Satsuma and Kongo, the battleship. So he serves on cruisers and battleships to begin with as a midshipman. And realistically, this is a perfect time to come into career, because if you think about it, he's ended service in 1910. That means he's going to be just at the right level and for fully trained by World War I beginning. And Japan joins World War I early. So he gets involved in lots of things in World War I. And he really does. In 1914, he joins the cruiser Aso. This includes cruising in China and various duties. He also does tours on the destroyer Sugi and the transport Seto. He has already managed to get through naval and torpedo gunnery schools though in 13 and 14, so he is very good. And he then goes on to study at Naval War College. He's well on his way to being a senior lieutenant. I think it's at just the right time for expansion, for all these things, to give a boost up in his career, give him opportunities to show his skills. And again, with careers, timing matters. Timing does matter. It matters in terms of what experience you get, it matters in terms of what opportunities you get. But from between 1919 and 1920, Lieutenant, by this point, Mikawa, is part of the Versailles Peace Treaty Conference in France. And this will not be his last experience of treaties. He gets involved in lots of them. He doesn't get involved in the Washington one, but he does get involved in London. During the 20s, he serves as a senior navigator on ships like the Haruna, the Tatsuya, the Ikoma, and the Aso. He does well again. He's then made an instructor at a naval torpedo school and works quite heavily towards development of certain torpedoes, including the things like the Long Lance. He works in the various phases towards their development. He is a really good technical and tactical mind when it comes to torpedoes. There is no surprise that many of Mikawa's later victories come from torpedoes. He is very good with them. They are his métier. By 1930, he's Commander Mikawa, and as I said, London Naval Treaty, and then made naval attaché in France. He's had a lot of diplomatic experience. He's had a lot of chances to go and see other cultures, to experience travel, to learn from other navies. He is what you could probably say is a hot shot coming through. He is someone who's being picked out for cool posts, for great positions, because he's considered good. Later he returns to Japan. He gets administrative and training duties with the rank of, now of course, equivalent to captain. Now of course I've been given these ranks in the English translations, but they're not the actual Japanese ranks. As I've said before, midshipman is Kaigun-chūjō Gunichi, which means trainee officer cadet. Then there's Kaigun-chūjō, ensign, equivalent, and Kaigun-chū, and he's gone for all these. And then Kaigun-tai, and then he's done Kaigun-shōsa, Kaigun-chūsa, and Kaigun-taisa. Now, this means he, as a captain, he's now the senior rank of what we would call tactical officers. So you have strategic officers. Those are ones with O at the end of their title. And so Kaigun-shōsho, Rear Admiral, basically trainee or small general/commander. Then there's Kaigun-chūjō, which means middle ranking, basically trained. And then Kaigun-taisho, senior admiral, senior or commander, and that's the equivalent to admiral. Now, the thing is, he's done pretty good. At every level we'd expect him to be involved in training, he's been involved in training. At every level we'd expect him to be involved in command, he's been involved in command. For all these ranks up. And you always have to remember that the Japanese do not copy the rank system from other nations. They have their own ranks. They have their own titles. They have their own symbology that goes with those ranks. And so you have to remember this to an extent when we are talking about their ranks, because we're giving you their equivalents because it's easier. It's just an English language channel. English is my primary language. Chemistry is a long way below physics in my linguistics. And foreign languages are something which is even more of an issue sometimes, depending on which one we're talking about, because I just find my tongue just doesn't get them right. But the thing is, it's important to understand that those ranks that we give might not be what they mean, or what they actually are. So, for example, with Dutch Rear Admirals, they are called Schubinacht, which actually translates as Sheriff of the Night, because again, it comes from their own system. So with this understanding, it starts to make sense of the career pattern, in that once you start to understand what the ranking translates as, and you start looking at the career, you can tell if someone's off track, ahead of track, or on track. With Mikawa, he is very much slightly ahead of track. He's doing teaching roles slightly earlier. He's doing various positions slightly earlier in his career than you necessarily expect. Command positions slightly earlier in his career than you expect. And that's a good thing, but it does show what he's expected of. He's expected to reach senior rank. His career is being harnessed in a way that's going to prepare him for it. And this is very much true when, quickly after commanding the Aoba and the Chokai, and then the Kirishima, he is promoted to Rear Admiral, i.e. 2, and I'm going to make sure I get this rank correct. Kaigun-chūjō and is put in 1st December 1936. And he serves as Chief of Staff of the IJN's 2nd Fleet. Then he does duty with the IJN Naval General Staff and the Imperial General Headquarters from 37 to 39. And then went to sea with various squadrons. First cruisers, then battleships. This has been something of his career. His career has been cruisers and battleships. Occasionally destroyers, occasionally things which are going to give him a command experience bump. But he's mostly kept to cruisers and battleships. And he's promoted to Vice Admiral. Or what I would tend to treat as Kaigun-chūjō, which basically means this is the level at which we start to trust our admirals in the Japanese culture to really do independent command in November 1940. And then, well, he's back aboard the Kirishima. He's back with the Congos, the fast, the cruiser battleships, the highly modified battle cruisers, which are part of the force which attacks Pearl Harbor. He's chosen to escort them. Why? Why do you choose Gunichi Mikawa for that role? Well, it's simple. He was trusted, along with all the other Kaigun-chūjō that were involved in that attack. If you look at the battle plan and the operational order of battle for Pearl Harbor, you realize quickly how important he was, because, well, there's a Kaigun-chūjō Chuchi Nagumo, who's the Vice Admiral in charge of 1st Air Fleet, and you start going down looking for the task force and going, who is the other Vice Admiral, who's the other Kaigun-chūjō with this force? And it is only one Gunichi Mikawa. In which case it's very simple. If anything happens to Nagumo, the senior officer with the task force is Mikawa. That tells you how trusted he is. Because, let's be honest, Nagumo, as hard-working as it was, wasn't always the fittest and healthiest of people. If he'd had a heart attack or something, who would take over the force? It would have been Mikawa. He's the senior officer there. He's the one with the senior staff. He's the one with the capabilities. He outranks everyone else there. It's very simple. And that shows you how trusted he is. He is there with his battle cruisers, the Hei and the Kirishima. He is there with cruisers following him that he himself has commanded, Tony, Chikuma, all these things. He understands this force. He's heading the escort force, but he is also the senior officer there. He's also there, trusted. If things go wrong and they need the carriers to bug out because they've managed to come face to face with a American battle fleet in the middle of the night, he will hold the line. He will die doing so, because that's probably what will happen with the force versus the battle line, but hopefully he'll buy enough time for the carriers to get away. So there you go, that's why he's at Pearl Harbor. With that being said, shameless book plug time. Now it's time for the shameless book plug. Isn't that fun? It's where I get to say thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, helping the channel grow, all that wonderful stuff that you all do that makes this channel possible. You know, when I record this video, I am getting perilously close to 16,500 subscribers. And this year's target, of course, is 20,000 for the family bet. And honestly, I remember it feels not long ago that I was on 4,000, 2,000, 1,050 at one point. And I just want to say thank you. I hope you're enjoying the videos. I hope you're finding them interesting. And I hope you're going to enjoy these series as they continue on. Because basically what I've set up is key leaders, key ships, key aircraft can just keep going round and round for a very, very long time. And I love them going on and going around. I've got the year's themes worked out. Next year's the Year of the Destroyer. And that will be announced soon. Basically the videos that will come out after these ones have been recorded, the ones which come out after we get back, theoretically, from Japan, will start announcing details for both the Christmas specials, when there will be a video going live every single day. There will be a video going live throughout the Christmas period. Either there will be an actual live video, or there will be a recorded video going live every single day, as is normal. The Historiathon, which is going to be in the 3rd week of November, which is going to be fun. I think it's the 3rd week of November anyway. Yes, it is the 3rd week of November. It's the week of the 17th to the 23rd. It's going to be a fun week. It's going to be 96 hours of live naval history. 5 12-hour broadcasts and 1 36-hour broadcast. Yes, I'm nuts, but I love it. And, of course, the Year of the Destroyer. Next year. It's going to be a good year. It's going to be a good piece of history. And there's also I have my actual conference, my public lecture, on the 13th of November at King's, which is going to be wonderful. It is streamed if people want to see it online. I do believe it's going to be streamed by King's College London. But yeah, if you want to actually attend, there are links in the Discord that you can go to the King's College War Studies Department's website, and you will find they've got events coming up, and you'll find all the sorts of details about that. And it's on the 13th of November, and I'll be talking about how you build ships with conflict management in mind, with conflict deterrence, how you should be structuring modern shipbuilding. I consider it a cool topic. With that being said, let's get on to his time in charge of 8th Fleet. Now, the interesting thing about Mikawa is that he seems to understand the reality of Japan's strategic position. When you look at the criticisms of him during the Guadalcanal campaign and Solomon campaign, it's usually things like, he doesn't aggressively follow up his victory. No, he doesn't go charging against unknown forces and possibly loses entire forces, knowing that he could be massively outnumbered. He does remember that he's at the end of a logistics line and needs to harbour his resources carefully. There is a belief he could have, especially after the Savo Island battle, which is what we'll end the discussion on, because chronologically I could end the discussion on the whole incident, but it seems if I want a more balanced conclusion, I'm going to end it on the battle. Which is why the next slide is going to be about the incident, the massacre. Well, Dorkman is, when he does have these battles, he's often, criticised and critiqued by people going, well, you could have gone south, or you could have gone further, and you could have taken out this merchant convoy, and this convoy of transports, and this convoy. Which he doesn't know they're there, necessarily. He has an idea they might be there. He has an inkling they might be there, but he doesn't know what kind of escort they have, and let's be honest, there are enough battles where you find a few plucky American destroyers holding up a cruiser force that really you do have to be careful, and if you've already expelled quite a lot of your torpedoes and quite a lot of your shells, do you really want to run into potentially more than that? Because there could be a bombardment force somewhere around. You don't know. It could be. And that can be problematic, because let's be honest, the refitted Congos, there isn't much they can take on in the world at this time and reasonably expect to win in a one-on-one fight. They are battle cruisers. Some of them, they have been refitted to the point at which they're being called fast battleships. I do realise that in certain Japanese terminology, they're interchangeable in naming wise with the battleships and in terms of what they're being designated. But the reality is, you've taken a pretty good Tiger-esque battlecruiser design and modernised it. You've pumped up its subdivision in some areas, and in a couple of vessels they probably have crossed the line to being fast battleships thanks to their subdivision. And lightly armoured fast battleships. But another couple, not, and it's not an even thing. It's not. It depends on the modernisation. A couple of them had more extensive internal modernisation because they needed it, because of structural issues they had. And so they got more subdivision added in, which pulls them up. This is the point you always have to remember when you're talking about whether a ship is a battleship, a fast battleship, a battle cruiser, or battle cruiser, 2 words. Or basically what we always called as a dreadnought armoured cruiser. Or invincible style ship. It's subdivision as well as armouring. It's thickness of armour, coverage of armour, and subdivision. It's a balance of all 3 of those things. And to an extent, whilst you can add in guns and gun caliber in it, to an extent you can't, because it often also reflects the industrial capacity of the nation involved in building it. It's like, we're going to shut off knives now, which is the example I usually give. They have 11-inch guns, not because Germany wishes to give them 11-inch guns, not because they're building battle cruisers, they're building fast battleships. But 11-inch guns are the biggest guns they have available. So they can have 2 ships sitting around with no guns until they get the 15-inch gun program actually running and in producing turrets, or they put on 11-inch guns, go with it, and then upgrade them later. Which would you do? Have 2 fast battleships sitting there doing nothing with no turrets on, or just put in the turrets of the guns you have? You're going to put in the guns you have, and it's similar to Congos. In many ways, they should have been replaced. But the Yamato program and the other issues they've had with the treaties mean they haven't been. They've been modernised, and they're being used, and they are still realistically battle cruisers. But they've had, in some cases, enough subdivision that the very, very wavy line, the fuzzy grey area between fast battleship and battle cruiser, one word, they are flirting with and possibly edging. But still, there's very few ships in the world they want to go on, or they want to go one-on-one versus. Now, if they are part of a task force and it's multiples on one, they can do things. If they can set the engagement range, if they've got other things to distract their opponents, they can do a lot of damage. And that's what the Japanese plan on using them as. Certainly Mikawa. That's how he likes to use those vessels when he's in charge of them. But the reality is, he doesn't. He's very good at husbanding his resources carefully and making sure that he's only expending what he needs to expend to do what he needs to do. And the thing about Mikawa is he's always looking for, where are the American carriers? Where are the American forces? He doesn't want to run into things which he can't fight. He doesn't want to run into fleets of carrier aircraft, because he'll never get to the carriers before the aircraft will decimate him in daytime. So he's not going to do these stupid things. He didn't realise the carriers had moved off. And he carries on doing these things. He carries on doing bombardments. He carries on fighting for problems, and one of the fighting for his forces. And one of the things that's most interesting is he's most against, probably the admiral who campaigns most against doing the Solomon Islands campaign, because he sees it as absolute waste of resources. He sees it as something which is just costing them men, material, everything they need. And yet he's forced to take responsibility for the loss of the Solomon Islands. He's reassigned to rear areas, the Philippines Act, because that's who they blame. But he's the one who was against it. He actually stated at one point that it was a black hole for Japanese soldiers, sailors and airmen, and ships. They refused to listen to him, and then they blamed him for their failure. You could start to like him. You could do. And he goes on to other commands, because at a certain point the General Staff goes, we can't really leave this guy out of it. Until 1945, of course, May 1945, when he retires from active duty in the IJN. He'd been reassigned to shore duty after the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and he'd taken part in the 2nd Southern Expeditionary Fleet in the Philippines, in the southwest area, and all sorts of things, because they needed him, but he doesn't really get to flirt with full command. Now the thing is, what stops you probably liking him is probably this, the Akikaze massacre. Now this is always one of those interesting stories, because frankly, the Akikaze massacre is brutal. The destroyer Akikaze, in March 1943, evacuates civilians from a Roman Catholic mission headquarters on Kariru Island and a group of missionaries from Wewak. Roughly 60 civilians, mostly German, plus servants and dependents, including free infants. They are massacred aboard the ship. They're killed aboard the ship. Now, Mikawa was commander of 8th Fleet at the time. That's what he was doing. And his chief of staff was Vice Admiral Shinzo Onishi. But only Lieutenant Shigetoku Kami is listed as having debriefing the captain of the Akikaze after the massacre. He's the only named officer who appears in testimony of Japanese witnesses, and he's the only one that's listed as being involved in any of the communications. Both Mikawa and Onishi are interrogated post-war by the Australian War Crimes Section, and basically the whole thing stinks. Both admirals put it entirely on Kami, possibly claiming he was aided by another staff officer in charge of civilian affairs, and they both claimed that they were not aware of the massacre until after the fact. However, as you might realise having listened to this video and listening to this channel, there is very little that happens in a navy which is ordered by a lieutenant. Especially not if you consider the lieutenant's rank in the Japanese Navy is actually Kaigun-chūjō. Basically it translates as senior trainee officer. Do you really think a senior trainee is going to be giving the orders to someone who's in command of a destroyer to massacre civilians? Because I don't. I'd say you're looking for a Kaigun-tasa, at the least, a captain, or a Kaigun-chūjō, or taisho, a vice admiral or an admiral. And there is no way that a lieutenant could order his communications to be encrypted and delivered without it being signed, at least in the counter methodology, countersigned, but signed probably by Mikawa or Onishi. However, the vast majority of junior officers involved, and or even quite senior officers involved, are all dead by the end of the war, so there's no one who can prove it. They had to accept command responsibility for being unable to prevent the war crimes, but that was it. That was it. That was it. So once you consider that, and the fact is that he's putting the blame entirely on a junior officer, and there is a possibility that the admiral didn't know it was ordered by the Vice Admiral. There's always that chance. There's also a chance it was ordered by the Admiral without the Vice Admiral knowing. It's unlikely that the Admiral and the Chief of Staff didn't know what the other was doing. It's unlikely, but it's a possibility. And then they were coming for each other post-war, but we'll never know. You can't prove it without testimony. So then we have the reason he's here. The Battle of Savo Island. And his legacy. Now, Savo Island is an interesting battle. You have an allied force on one side involving both Richard Turner and Victor Crutchley, with 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers and 15 destroyers. And you have Gunichi Mikawa on the outside with 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers and a destroyer. Now here's the thing, one of the interesting things I found this battle is, once again, it's another battle where Richard Turner manages to push the blame for his own actions onto someone else. When it comes to Pearl Harbor, he's the guy who decides not to inform the people in Pearl Harbor that he actually thinks there's a high probability they're going to get attacked. So they're labouring on the idea that they're not going to get attacked, and their likely threat is saboteurs, not air attack. You know, this is the guy who single-handedly managed to push the blame onto other people every single time. It's amazing what political connections will do for you. And the same happens with Victor Crutchley. There are many issues in the various commanders in World War II, but Richard Turner is probably one of those officers who is most able to wind me up with his ability to push blame for his own decisions on other people. He's a savant at it. He just is. Anyway. This force is coming in, the Japanese are sending their force in, to try and push off the Americans, because there is an amphibious operation going on in Solomon Islands. And they really don't have a lot of force to go and engage it. They really don't. Let's be honest. He is a frigging Kaigun-chūjō. He has 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and a destroyer under his command. And let's be honest, the light cruisers are old, to say the least. And the heavy cruisers, well, what can I say about them, the heavy cruisers? They're not bad. They're not bad. They're for attacker class, Ober class, and Teiko class. They're not bad. But they're also not in a great position. Now, why am I blaming Turner, not Crutchley? Because Turner insists on having a meeting, so Crutchley has to go visit him. And there's a whole argument of whether he should take his ship to visit them or not, and all those things. And realistically, when you have a Vice Admiral coming to visit you, he's going to bring his flagship. That's what they do. He's got to bring his staff officers with him. It's got to be a staff-on-staff meeting if there's going to be a full debriefing. This is one of the reasons why you don't have it. You send a staff officer out to carry a briefing out to them. You don't demand they come to you. You send a staff officer out to them to coordinate. Now, that's what you have staff officers for. Instead of you calling the senior officer to you. Basically, when you're doing that, it's a power trip. And it's something which, after Savo Island, I am glad to say the Americans stopped doing. Because it's another legacy of the peacetime experience of, we can demand the commander come to see us. And you can make case otherwise of, oh, well, he should have known, he should have flown with just his plane or done something. Yeah, possibly, but that's not really the practice at the time with any officers. That's what happens when staff officers are being moved around, not when you're asking for an admiral to come and brief you, especially not an admiral who's got the postings which Crutchley had. So that causes trouble. We'll leave that to one side. The whole thing about the battle is that, as you can see here, Mikawa manages to slot literally down the slot, but managed to maneuver carefully between spaces, managed to use the geography as it is that is there to his advantage when he was maneuvering. And that allows him to position himself pretty darn well. And the battles, well, he pushes in, he does what he needs to do. He gets into range and he managed to bring back down the damage. He really does bring down the damage. And that's probably the saving grace, realistically. It's a night fight. And a night fight is a good fight in some regards for them. A night fight is a good fight because it enables the Japanese to work to their strengths, and their strengths definitely are their coordination and their capabilities at night fighting within visual range. With long-range torpedo strikes, but also, more importantly, with gunnery. One of the things that really makes it an interesting fight is that, well, Mikawa does exactly what you expect someone from Mikawa's training to do. His flagship, the Shokai, leads the whole way through the fight. She's the one which goes the furthest south. She's the one which, goes in first. She's the one which is there the whole way through. Actually, he manages to pretty much arrange it so that he is first one into the fight and last one out with the track he takes. And realistically, we can't really critique his actions that much because they come straight out of Japanese doctrine. They are go in hard, go in fast, launch a lot of torpedoes, fire as many guns as you can, and then get out of there. Leave someone else to clear up the mess. The skill he'd found at managing to avoid the aerial patrols comes down to the fact there weren't as many aerial patrols as everyone was expecting. This is something else which happens consistently with Turner's amphibious operations. There is a later one which leads to the Battle of Samar, where he's asked someone to reconnaissance, he's presuming someone else is patrolling somewhere else, and he doesn't check. I'm sorry, it happens too many times in World War II with Turner that he doesn't bother to check. He presumes, assumes, infers that others are doing things as he's requested or as he's heard, and doesn't check. So whilst this is a very good battle from the point of view of Mikawa, he achieves a great victory. Let's be honest, a battle with the odds where your opponent loses over 1,000 dead and you lose 58. Where you have 2 heavy cruisers damaged and a light cruiser damaged, and they've got 4 heavy cruisers sunk, another heavy cruiser damaged, and 2 destroyers damaged. And you were going in as the smaller force. That is a victory. That is a great victory. The fact is, though, in a nice way, the Solomon Islands, if it had been up to Mikawa, he wouldn't have been fighting that. His view of the Solomon Islands was they weren't worth it. And that's the interesting thing, because realistically, he believes that a lot of this stuff is just not worth it. That it's going against their overall strategy, it's going against their mission, it's making them fight for land and support operations which they don't want to support and they shouldn't be wasting resources on. And it keeps happening. So, with that being said, what is the legacy of Mikawa? Well, it's hard to argue he's not an effective naval officer. In fact, he's effective enough that you're certain that if anything's going on in his battle staff, his command, he'll know about it. Which means he certainly did know about a massacre. Whether he ordered it, condoned it, or just didn't punish it. He knew about it. And that really, for me, puts a stain on it. Studying him, he's a good naval officer to learn from. He's got experience. Some of the things he implements are really good. He's got a good track record when it comes to development, staff work, all these things. He's a fine naval officer to look at from that perspective. But he forgot the big thing about being a naval officer. Especially one who has done as much diplomacy as he has. Is that you're a representative of your nation. For good and for ill. And anything you do bad, morally bad, like ruining children and innocents, that's multiplied by 10 because of the uniform you wear. Because you're not acting just as you're acting as an officer of the Navy. An officer of your nation. And that's the thing, realistically, with naval officers. They spend a lot more time being diplomats than pretty much any other service. A lot more time on show. Your impressions of them, for good or ill, will define often your impressions of a nation. Because they're the people you meet. Okay, maybe you meet their tourists as well, and their politicians, but naval officers are you going to meet quite a lot. Especially in this era, the naval officers are going to be the visible parts of their nation, of their government, the visible official representatives. You don't do what he did. Those were missionaries. Those were women and children. Those were no threat. And if someone does do it, and you genuinely didn't order it, but it's done under your command, then you execute them. Because they've just broken the rules of war. And no one's ever sanctioned that. For as long as there have been rules for war. Which does lead to another interesting option, though. And this is when it starts to get a little bit conspiracy theorish, because when you start to look at the officers involved, who would have been part of decision training, as said, all of them are dead. All of them. Some of them found some very creative ways to die in battle. It does become an interesting thing to think that maybe, to an officer of Mikawa's generation, rather than executing officers for such a dishonourable deed, you give them a chance to redeem themselves and earn their honour back before they die by dying in the name of the Emperor in battle. That might sound like I'm searching for a good thing on him to make him look better, but please note I'm not. Because you see, that's kind of the equivalent of, well, a few years ago there was all the Roman Catholic priests, and there were the issues where the church just kept moving them around, and it's rather the same. Instead of expunging it, you're covering it up. You're providing them with a way out where they can retain their honour and die with honour. It's nice to your fellow naval officers. It doesn't redeem you. It makes you complicit. It's an option, though. There are very few staffs which suffer such a high rate of annihilation as that particular star from that time in March 1943 of 8th Fleet in the IJN Imperial Japanese Navy. So, with that being said, what's today's question? Well, I'd like you to think about it, because if Mikawa had had his way, the Solomon Islands wouldn't have been defended. They'd have been withdrawn from. What do you think that effect that has on World War II? Or rather, if they'd been defended, it would have been in token force to force the Americans to do something, and the Allies to do something, but not enough that it would actually been a problem to rapidly evacuate them. What do you think that has an impact on in terms of the course of World War II? What do you think happens? And that being said, when this video comes out, well, I'm sure I've got a whole load of things coming up, but I haven't seemed to put the slide in there. It's a fun time. Anyway, this will be a Friday video, so there'll be a Saturday video tomorrow. And that's going to be a fun one, because that's going to be, if I'm not mistaken, what happens if the Dominions are separate powers in the Washington Naval Treaty? And, well, I had two options with that one. I could go, well, the most likely option is that they're limited to cruisers, and are not given anything else. They're just separate cruiser powers, and the US Navy, the US government are forced to accept it, because that's the price of Britain joining. But there is a kind of an outside chance, because the only capital ship one of them has is a battle cruiser, and it sort of made me think, well, perhaps there's a way of solving the hood problem in the capital ships issues, and the 16-inch gun problem, and some of the other issues, and, well, I ended up going a fun route, okay? I ended up going, I'm honest the whole way through that particular alternate history. I did admit that this is the second most likely option for how this works, but I found this one more fun to explore than the most likely one. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and hope you enjoyed. Hope you found it interesting.